Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's the weekend. It's time for your favorite podcast.
You know what? You know what, Jurg? Why don't you just get on out of here? This has nothing to do with you anymore. That's right, folks. The idiots are running the asylum today. It's Mutiny on the Chaos. Welcome to the Sports Section of Chaos, episode 60, with a pirate, nonetheless. I am your new host for this episode, Podfather Rick, joined, of course, by Justin at the bottom, Justin Zuckman Zucktails. Justin, we finally done it. We gotten rid of Jurg. How does it make you feel?
Oh, man. It's just, I feel like I could finally go free again. You know what I mean? Like,
you should.
Such a weight off. Maybe I can get out of this dungeon now. And he's not watching, so.
Exactly. No, that'd be great. You could just, try and get out the door, like Black Phone style, of course. And as mentioned, it is Mutiny on the H.M.S. cast with the Pirates. So next to me, of course, is Billy Shakes, Shakespeare the Pirate, Justin's new nemesis for the 2023 season. I do got to say, though, it's probably an upgrade from last year with Sandoval, the deer, because I know you and him were not really fans. There's something to like about Billy Shakes. He's got an earring and a mustache and an eye patch, and he's a pirate.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here. There was a lot of things that went on this week in the world of pro football. Of course, we had some signings, we had some releases, and we had an article come out by the one and only Adam Shine that we'll review with the 9 guaranteed risers by the one and the only Adam Shine, of course. Let me see if I can pull Jurg back in here because, with chaos here, he's yeah. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, pretty good. I heard a shot about my weight, so I don't appreciate that. So, Justin.
That was Billy.
It's a weight off of me.
Yeah, sure.
No. I mean, Billy made the shot about the weight, but that's neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can tell, folks, this is going to be our chaotic as ever show because the roles are all reversed, basically. I am guiding the ship, so we're going to crash into the rocks on Thieves, but that's okay because you know what? Next week we'll just get new rocks and a new ship. That's how we're going to go around here.
Very true.
Of course, what that means, too, is that all of our roles have been flipped. So instead of me doing the rants at the end, a very special guest will be doing the rants at the end. And as we start with trivia, and we start with the store brand and all of that. So last week you loved it so much, the trivia at home. Well, Jurg has returned once again, and he will give you some more trivia and then continue on with our games. The quasi-games master, the Mayim Bialik to Justin's Ken Jennings. Jurg, lead us in our trivia discussion today.
First off, that's funny.
This is.
All right. So we had some fun trivia last week when it came to Patrick Mahomes and the teams. He had more playoff wins than, if I'm not mistaken, it was 8 franchises in the NFL that he had more playoff wins than, if memory serves.
Something like that, yeah.
7 or 8.
Yep.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the big number's back. It'll be 8 teams will be the answer to this one. There are 8 teams in NFL history whose all-time receiving leader has less than 10K career yards with that squad. Now, maybe did they surpass 10K receiving yards, when they went to another team? Probably, but we don't care about that. We're talking about when they were with the team, they lead the team in franchise records for receiving yards, but it didn't reach 10K. There are 8 clubs who have that distinction. Name the 8.
The Jets have to be one.
Yeah.
Nope.
The Jets have a 10K receiver?
Yeah. Don Maynard.
Yes, Don Maynard. That makes sense, yeah. It's old
I
time.
wasn't sure what the totals would be so far back, but I know they haven't had much since then. So
he has, because I have all the numbers right here. He finished his career with 11,732 yards.
All right, so Justin, let's try and just knock out a few names here and there just to kind of get. So the Jets are out, I think. I think Buffalo's out too because you have either Andre Reed or Eric Moulds, who I think got over 10K with them. So I'm saying they're out too.
What about the Patriots?
The Patriots are a pretty good shout because I don't really recall any receivers that they had that were top tier. I mean, Moss was there for only a couple of games, for a couple of years, I think, right?
So does it have to be a receiver or can it be any player?
It just says receiving yards, so
Gronk probably got that, yeah.
You think Gronk got 10,000 yards?
Yeah, a couple thousand yard seasons.
Okay.
Remember, this is all with that team, so we don't care about what he did in Tampa Bay.
No one cares what he did in Tampa Bay.
So if we keep going by division, what about Miami? They have any long-term receivers there?
I would think so. I would think a guy like O.J. McDuffie from the 90s probably was, but that might not be a bad shout. Miami. And you know what? There's another team in Florida too. I think that's a pretty good shot. They're Jacksonville. Because I think Keenan McCardell, I think, is their receiving leader, but I think he only had like 6,300 when he was there.
Let's go with that.
So let's go Jacksonville.
No, Jimmy Smith.
Oh, Jimmy Smith
Eclipsed 12K yards.
Damn it.
His time as a Jaguar.
Oh, I forgot about Jimmy Smith. Partially because of his run as a UFC commentator and the Monday Night Raw announcer. So, different Jimmy Smith, right? Sorry. Jeez. Darn, I thought for sure. Okay. All right, let's go back division by division then.
I think we can eliminate the NFC North. I feel like the Packers have to have one.
They've been around for so long. They have
the
to.
Lions had Calvin Johnson.
Yes. The Vikings had Chris Carter. So absolutely.
Yeah. And then who'd the Bears have? Who'd your Bears have?
I don't know if my Bears had anybody that I'm thinking of.
So long. You telling me they don't have one receiver over 10,000 yards? The Jets have Don Maynard.
That's true. The Jets did have Don Maynard. That surprised us all. But I think like a lot of the guys that were on the Bears, weren't there for long enough because they were a running based team. Like I know who was there? Brandon Marshall was there for a bit, but I think he only got to 4,000.
Not that long though.
No, but he only got to 4,000. I think there's not a lot of guys that have gotten 10,000 receiving yards total in their career. And I don't think anything, because I'm trying to think. Muhsin Muhammad was there for a bit, but he did all his damage in Carolina. I don't. Was James Lofton wasn't there? Maybe it is Green Bay, because I know James Lofton was in Green Bay, but I don't know if he got to 10,000 with Green Bay by himself. He's over 10,000, but I don't think he got over 10,000 in Green Bay.
Donald Driver didn't hit over 10,000.
Devontae
was there for a long time. He doesn't have over 10,000.
Oh man.
I know the Bucks can't be it because Mike Evans was there. They were drafted the same year. But I know also Devontae has less receiving yards than Mike Evans. So
did Devontae hit 10,000 in his career yet?
I don't know.
I don't think he did.
I don't know. I think it's close. This was a trivia question. I wish I remembered the answer.
Yeah. It's not Washington either, because Art Monk was their big guy, and he definitely got over 10,000 with Washington. I'll throw Green Bay out there as a guess.
The Green Bay Packers leading receiver Donald Driver finished his career with 10,137 receiving yards.
Wow. Okay, that's fine.
For the record, I only have the number one on each team, so if you say someone who is second or third, I'd have no idea. I only have the top guy.
I mean, that's fine.
Just for context purposes.
Okay. All right.
What about Baltimore?
Ding, ding, ding. The first one is down. The Baltimore Ravens' all-time leading wide receiver is Derek Mason with 5,777 receiving yards.
They've had plenty of good receivers there, but they're almost never drafted there, and they're always there for a few years and then out.
Exactly. Derek Mason.
Yes.
Oh,
who had a very successful career with the Tennessee Titans, funny enough.
Yes, he did. Derek Mason. Good Lord. Okay, so let's stick with the AFC North for a second here, because that was a good poll. Pittsburgh
had. I think Hines Ward is above that.
I think so too. Cleveland. The new incantation of the Browns, definitely not. The new incantation of the Browns, absolutely not.
I'm trying to think of someone
from
Cleveland who had that. I can't think of very many top receivers they've had.
And again, if the Ravens' top receiver is Derek Mason, then I would think Cleveland didn't have anybody of note here. I'll burn it. The Browns.
Number 2 right there. Ozzie Newsome is the all-time Browns wide receiver, 7,980 yards.
Oh, that's just ironic. A longtime Ravens GM holds a Browns record. Well, there you go.
So
what about
here's a question.
Yeah.
Is AJ Brown I'm sorry, AJ Green, the leading receiver in Cincinnati, and
No.
if so, did he eclipse 10,000 yards? All right, so
Wait. I didn't hear the answer. Is he the leading receiver in Cincinnati?
yeah,
So then no.
Jurg
So then
shot it
no.
down.
Yeah, no, because that would have made sense if he was. Okay, so
He had a lot of receiving yards too. It's not Ocho Cinco, is it?
no,
It
it can't.
It
It
is.
really?
It is. Yeah, I'll
It
help you guys
is?
out.
Really?
Chad Ochocinco, 10,783.
So I guess it's not Cincinnati.
Did we guess the Patriots yet or no?
We did not.
I think we should because I think Randy Moss only played there for a couple seasons, and I think
Well, but like Welker or Edelman didn't have.
no.
Welker had a ton of yards.
Welker I think was short of 10,000, and Edelman definitely not. There's a guy that I know that went over 10,000, but he did like half with the Patriots. It was Irving Fryer. He might be the guy that's leading. I think the Patriots are a good shout here.
Go for it.
I'll go New England.
You locking that in officially?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
All right. The New England Patriots career leading receiver, Stanley Morgan, 10,352.
Morgan Stanley?
Bank.
Like the bank? Really? Okay.
He combined two great names, the 4-time Pro Bowler and 2-time All-Pro. He led the NFL in receiving touchdowns in 1979.
Wow.
Member of the Patriots Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Played his entire career from 1977 to 1989 with the Patriots. His final year in the league, played with the Colts.
Of course he did. Terrible. All right, let's go out west for a second here. Let's go to the AFC West because I know 3 teams I know are out. Denver had Rod Smith. Kansas City had Tony Gonzalez and Travis Kelce now. The Raiders had Tim Brown. Who did the Chargers have? Is Keenan Allen over 10,000, do you think?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know if they had anybody else. Because that would be the guy, I would think. Vincent Jackson, definitely not over 10,000. Keenan Allen.
Jackson was good, though.
Yeah. I think
Who was Dan Fouts throwing the ball to?
that's a good question. That's a real good question because yeah, he was definitely slinging the ball in the 80s a lot. Man, I don't know. That's a good one. Okay, hold the Chargers off to the side for a second. Let's go to the NFC West. Jerry Rice in San Francisco, obviously. Anquan Bolden or Larry Fitzgerald with the Cardinals.
I don't know if Anquan Bolden hit that number with Arizona.
I don't think he did, but Larry Fitzgerald did,
Larry
of course.
Fitzgerald, yeah.
Steve Largent in Seattle, I think absolutely, and Isaac Bruce or Torrey Holt with the Rams. So I think the West is clear except for the Chargers.
How many do we have, Jurg? We have 3.
I think we have 2.
You guys have 2. You named the Browns and the Ravens.
So I'm trying to think.
How many are there? 8?
There's
Yes.
8. So AFC South, there's definitely Marvin Harrison for the Colts, Jimmy Smith, who we just learned about from the Jaguars, Andre Johnson for the Texans.
Did he hit 10,000?
Oh, he absolutely did.
He
I
did.
think he absolutely did, yeah. That leaves the Titans. But is that Titans/Oilers? If Derek Mason got 5,000 with the Ravens, then there's definitely nobody on the Titans that I can think of. And it would be so poetic for a Jurg question to feature the Titans in some way. I'll run with it. Tennessee.
Boom, boom, boom. The Tennessee Titans all-time franchise receiver, Ernest Givens,
Yep.
with 7,935.
That's
AJ
an
Brown,
Oilers guy, yeah.
AJ Brown definitely would have eclipsed that if they hadn't traded him. But
Well, that's an Oilers guy for sure, so that makes sense. Okay. NFC South.
I'm trying to think. What about the Saints? I feel like Carolina had Steve Smith or
Carolina had Steve Smith or Musa Muhammad. Atlanta had Julio Jones. Tampa Bay has Mike Evans. Marcus Colston, shout out to Hofstra, was a big guy for the Saints, but I don't know if he got 10,000 with the Saints.
That's what I was thinking.
But I'm trying to think if there's somebody sneaking up from the 80s or 70s that we don't know about. I think the Saints are a good shout, honestly.
Let's do it, Saints.
Let's run with it.
Marcus Colston, in his Saints career, he is the all-time leading receiver, 9,759. So there is another one. You guys have 4 out of the 8.
God, he was such a gem. I loved Marcus Colston when he played. I drafted him on my fantasy team my first couple of years.
He was very good. If I will say this, if Michael Thomas had been healthy the last 3 seasons now running,
yeah,
he might be an outside shot. He probably would be close to 10K at this point if he had not gotten all these injuries.
Yeah. Dallas had Michael Irvin. Washington had Art Monk. What about the Giants?
You're more of a Giants historian than I am.
Amani Toomer, I know, was their main guy because Ike Hilliard was not going to be the answer to this question. I don't know if Toomer got, but the thing is, there's so much history with the Giants that you'd have to think when Wyatt Tittle was slinging the ball in the 50s that he had to, or Norm Van Brocklin throwing at Yankee Stadium, something like that. The 80s Giants teams were built on rushing. Let's go with the New York Giants.
Amani Toomer is the Giants' franchise leading receiver. Kind of crazy because of all the receiving talent they've had even over the last 10, 12 years or so. But he did not eclipse 10K yards, 9,497.
Wow. Okay.
You guys have 3 teams left. I will say 5 guesses, maybe 6 at the end if I give you guys a hint.
Okay, so we moved the Chargers out for the conversation, but let's bring them back in.
We didn't do the Chargers or the Bears. We didn't come up with a guy.
I also think maybe the Eagles. You know what? Actually, the Bears make sense in a way because they've never had, thanks to you for ruining this mind-blowing fact, Justin, they've never had a 4,000-yard quarterback passing in the NFL, in an NFL season. The Bears do make sense in that way. I'm trying to think, Chargers, I'm trying to think if anyone's eclipsed Keenan Allen or if there's anybody else. Oh, Antonio Gates.
Yeah.
How the you know what, did I forget him?
I forgot him too.
Yeah.
He's a very forgettable player for someone that should be very well recognized.
Exactly.
Hall of Famer, or at least he will be.
Elite 8 basketball player at Kent State too. I'll shout it out, and if there's Bears fans on that are knocking me for this history, I apologize. I can't remember the name of the guy right now, but I'll go with Chicago.
The Chicago Bears' all-time leading wide receiver is Johnny Morris, and he finished his career with 5,059 yards. Because remember, when DJ Moore got traded to the Bears, we talked about it, and we said how if you insert just his career in Carolina, I think he would be first all-time, if not second, in yards. So
5,059. Oh my goodness.
I mean,
wow.
I will give credit. It is a different game, but that's
rough. That's rough. Also,
for just a quick fun fact, because you mentioned the name earlier, Rick. Michael Irvin is not the Cowboys' all-time receiver.
No, I didn't.
No,
I know he's not, but he's.
I know you guys didn't say the Cowboys, but just a fun fact, because I'm sure some people might be shocked by it.
No, of course. I mean, I know for a fact that he's not, but I also know that he eclipsed 10,000 yards regardless.
Yeah. Do you want to guess who is the Cowboys' all-time receiver?
See, I would have guessed Don Maynard.
It is Jason.
Is it
Jason Witten?
Jason Witten. Yeah, of course. Okay, so we have 6.
I was gonna say it's got to be someone we've spoken about. Then
we didn't talk about Philadelphia yet. I can't remember a good Philadelphia wide receiver.
Well, Chris Carter played with them for a little while, didn't he?
Yeah, but he made most of his run with the Vikings, though. No. I think he started with Philly, then went to Minnesota, and that's where he.
Is that what it was?
Run. Yeah, I can't remember anybody else from Philadelphia that I would venture to say.
It's got to be someone we're missing in Philly.
Yeah.
Alshon Jeffrey.
Alshon Jeffrey. Yeah. Damn.
Deshaun Jackson. Did he hit 10,000?
Did he hit 10,000? He might have, but I don't know if it was all with Philly. Because he was only there for, what, 8 years?
How long was T.O. there?
Not long at all. Not long enough. I say we're on with Philadelphia.
What about Brent Selleck?
Oh boy, what about Greg Ward? Just throw random receivers out there. Yeah, I'll say Philadelphia.
Philadelphia Eagles all-time leading wide receiver is Harold Carmichael, and he did not eclipse 10K yards. He didn't even eclipse 9K, 8,978 yards, leading the Eagles franchise.
Okay,
so, lads, one team remains.
So we hit 7, and I think the one that we discussed Miami, but we didn't actually put them down as an answer there.
Who was Marino's leading receiver?
Had to be OJ McDuffie or Gadsden, but I don't recall either of those guys being significant targets for 10K for that long of a time. I'm trying to think of anybody else that it might have been. I don't think so. I mean, those are the two guys that I know of, and obviously I don't know of anybody else. You know, one thing that I'm not is a Dolphin savant. So at least for the the football team. Dolphins themselves, yes, I'm a savant on that, but that's a different story for a different day. Jeez. Mark Clayton was there too for a while. I truly believe it's Miami. That's the only team we haven't eliminated yet.
Something is pulling me back to the. I feel like Washington could have had like. Who did you say who they had?
Art Monk was there for a decade.
When?
In the 70s.
Look, he had. If he was there for a decade, did he have 1,000 yards every season?
He was the only option for Theismann to throw the ball to, or Thiesman, as we learned a couple weeks ago. He was the only option, and I think that was before they got John Riggins. Because then when John Riggins came around, they definitely changed the offense around. But before that, it was definitely a passing to Art Monk find him, and he could catch the ball, man. He could. I mean, we have the guess. Do you want to burn the guess in Washington? See if I'm wrong. We have the opportunity to.
If you're more confident in Miami, we could do Miami.
You have 3 guesses left, so you both could, in theory, submit one now and still have one left over if you're both wrong.
You know what? Let's say both. Give us Washington and then give us Miami.
All right. So the Washington, whatever the hell you want to call them at this point, Art Monk did eclipse 10K. He finished his career with 12,026 yards for the Commanders / Reskins /
football team
/ God knows what else to call them. The
guys.
Miami Dolphins all-time leading receiver, you did not mention his name, is Mark Duper.
No reason
and
to.
He finished his career with 8,869 receiving yards. Therefore, you guys have fully gotten all 8 teams whose all-time leading receiver did not eclipse 10K yards. Congratulations, boys.
I mean, that took a little bit longer than anticipated, but I think the process of elimination kind of helped us out too. And there were names there that were being pulled out that were just like, I forgot that they had even played that long and had eclipsed that many yards.
You guys damn near mentioned every single guy on this list for the most part.
I think we did pretty well with that, to be honest with you. No complaints there.
I think the only name, I think you guys mentioned him, but I don't know if you guys said you weren't sure if he was the all-time receiver, a leader for his team. Mike Evans does lead the Buccaneers all time.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he led, but I did know he had eclipsed 10,000 yards, considering it's his 11th season now, and he's had 1,000 yards every year.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna change this year with Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask as
Maybe he gets traded.
Yeah,
maybe he does. Maybe the Jets will take him. I mean, I don't know if that would be a future would you rather question here. But speaking of that,
well, it could be. It could be a fact or fiction question.
It could be. But continuing with the Jurg store brand games here, I know we talked about this off the air. Well, Justin, I got to ask you first. This is your second week in a row that you're on this side of the trivia coin. Are you missing the one being asked the questions, or are you kind of liking where you are?
That's a good question. We'll save that for Would You Rather.
There you go. It reminds me of that April Fool's Day, like 97, where Pat Sajak and Vanna White were on Jeopardy together. And like Pat was the host of Jeopardy, and then Alex Trebek was on Wheel of Fortune by himself, basically. We're spinning the wheel for charity and whatnot. It was kind of funny. I don't know. Good times in '97. Anywho's, let's move on to our next game. Jurg, would you like to go to Would You Rather, or would you like to go to Fact or Fiction?
Let's go to Would You Rather. I mean, both of these are going to tie into one of the talking points we're going to have before the main event of the show. So let's do this, and this will be a very team-specific one, boys, because we have a Jets fan and a Bears fan here, and we have two neutral observers and myself and good old Billy Shakes the Pirate there. Who would you rather your team sign personally, Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins?
Okay. Well, this is interesting because basically the question boils down to, what do you think your team needs the most? Do you think your team needs a better running back or a better wide receiver? And
team specific, like I have to answer for the Jets.
You answer for the Jets and I answer for the Bears.
Basically. I think it's more. I think we do tend to do generic, but I feel like we don't talk about your guys' teams enough. So
correct.
We're going team specific on this one.
Correct. Well, so as a Bears fan, I think that both of our positions, running back and wide receiver, are definitely areas of need. I mean, I do agree that DJ Moore does make the wide receiving room a little bit better. And he definitely becomes the number one with Chase Claypool being the number two. I think that's a very solid spot there. I do not like our running back room, though, at all. Deontay Foreman doesn't drive the needle for me. Khalil Herbert, I know, is a younger running back, but I'm still kind of waiting for him to break out. He had 731 yards last year, but he only started one game. Like he wasn't a starting running back, because I know they had was it Montgomery last year, I believe it was.
Yes.
And then they did just sign Travis Homer, but again, that doesn't really move the needle for me anyway. I think if you bring in a guy like Dalvin Cook to Chicago, I think he's an explosive option. He's still very young. He's a lot younger than DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins, I think, going into his age 31 season, and Cook is only 27. Will be 28 in August. So I think that definitely adds credence to having him on the roster. I think it would be a great get for the division rival to pick up a running back like Dalvin Cook. Because I think if you add Dalvin Cook to the Justin Fields rushing attack, that 1-2 punch is going to open up the play for the wide receivers to really get a lot more targets, because you have to stop two electric runners in Fields and Cook. So as Chicago, I think it's really emblematic of the Bears, bring in the guy who's the better running back, because as you heard, we only have a 5,000-yard receiver career lifetime. So, let's go with the running back here. Keep it up. I'm going to say Dalvin Cook to the Bears.
See, this is an interesting question for me, because I feel like both of those rooms are actually pretty crowded now in New York. I really do like the running backs that they have, and I like the receivers that they have. Now, I'm not saying that neither of those players would be an upgrade, because DeAndre Hopkins coming into the Jets locker room would make him immediately the number one receiver there. He is the best receiver on the team, if that's the case. I don't know if Dalvin Cook would be better than Breece Hall. I know he's obviously had a better career, but the way Breece Hall started off the season and the way that the Vikings unceremoniously cut Dalvin Cook with his injury history, I'm not sure that he's the best, but I do think it would probably be the bigger upgrade for the team. Just because given the fact that the Jets have already signed three receivers technically, but signed two receivers that they expect to play right out of the gate. So I think in terms of style of play, they would probably sign Dalvin Cook, and it would make more of an impact than DeAndre Hopkins. Again, not necessarily saying that I wouldn't want DeAndre Hopkins either, but if they sign Dalvin Cook, he's more of a force and a 1-2 punch with Breece Hall than DeAndre Hopkins would be as a complement to Lazard and Garrett Wilson and Mecole Hardman. So I'm going to say I think I would prefer Dalvin Cook, and that's really no shake at all to DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I respect the man. To me, he's one of the best receivers in the league, if not the best. It's a shame that he's had, certain issues on certain teams. And I don't necessarily think it's his fault. It might be. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. But, yeah, I mean, I would take DeAndre Hopkins. At almost any team, he's an upgrade to that receiver to the number one receiver position.
No.
But I don't think it fits as well. And I also want to take into account the age. I would take the younger running back versus the older receiver. And even if they do, they might have the same amount of time left because that's how both of those positions shake out. But
Justin, would you consider this option here? I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on Garrett Wilson, but do you think that with all the ads they've made so far, if they added DeAndre Hopkins into this wide receiver room, that the Jets would be stunting Garrett Wilson's trajectory after Rookie of the Year 1? Because there's a lot of other guys that are basically fighting for the same place at the table than Garrett Wilson was.
well, they have already brought in a ton of receivers. Now, I like to think that bringing in top veteran talent will maybe stunt them in the short term, but help people in the long term. Because if you see a guy, the way a guy like DeAndre Hopkins prepares for games and does his thing and works hard and the things that he's going about in practice and the little tweaks and the little things, I think that if you're an intelligent enough player, that makes you better in the long run. And I think Garrett Wilson loves to study the game. He's a hard worker and he has the tools to make himself great, but he goes out of his way to make sure he is great in this league. And it's possible to have 1,000-yard receivers. We saw it last year in Miami. It's unlikely. You already have two guys that have had a history of 1,000 yards. I believe Lazard has hit it once, and Garrett Wilson had it last year. Now, I am curious to see what he would be with a true number one quarterback behind center, but I don't know that it would stunt him long term. I mean, it would definitely be a disappointment for this year because Garrett Wilson had 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns last year with 3 different guys that I don't even know. Did either one of them eclipse 1,000 yards?
Who did? My bad.
Any of the Jets quarterbacks?
1,000 yards passing?
Yeah, they were bad, man.
I know they were bad, but I'm pretty sure one of them exceeded that.
I think the most one started was 6 games. That's probably 1,000 yards. But yeah, look, either way, they weren't great. And he had an electric rookie season and won Rookie of the Year. So with a Hall of Famer, albeit on his way out for sure, but all 3 did.
Yeah, Zach Wilson passed for
the outrageous comment that I just made.
Yeah, right.
I think that I would rather see what Garrett Wilson does with Aaron Rodgers being the number one guy, because I do believe that Garrett Wilson will probably be the number one guy, and Lazard will end up being the 2.
Yeah,
I'd like to see what he does with Aaron Rodgers as the number 1, as opposed to bringing in a DeAndre Hopkins, who again is technically an upgrade, but is not the long-term answer.
I agree with that. I agree. I think that's a fair shout there. I think you're right.
Again, it's really nothing against DeAndre Hopkins. If they didn't sign Lazard, I'd be like, let's do it.
Let's go get him. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have Lazard. I think Mecole Hardman is going to be a scary prospect that no one's really thinking about. He's going to have a lot of touches. They're going to run a lot of end arounds and things like that. They're just going to do everything to get the ball to him. And Dalvin Cook fits in better.
Yeah, I agree. Similar scenario there. I think Dalvin Cook's an upgrade to their current running back room versus Hopkins would be a great upgrade for the Bears on the wide receiver spot, but I think the need is more so for the running backs in that side. Jurg, if you had a team, which you don't, but
why don't you have
just
a team, Jurg?
Just assign me a team. Just assign me a random team right now.
Nope. You know how we have to do this. The Wheel of Chaos.
Tennessee.
Episode 61. Wheel of Chaos.
Yeah, I'm not listening to that, Justin.
Fine. Minnesota.
Ooh.
No.
You'll be Rick's rival.
I don't root for frauds.
Chaos.
No. He has to go with Seattle because he has to follow his spiritual guide, Geno Smith.
God, Jesus, those are 2 stacked rooms in both ends. It's just a luxury. It's like if I have both a Ferrari and a Mercedes, and if I just want to add like a Camaro there.
Yeah, you have a Ferrari and a Mercedes and a Camaro, and you're driving a Honda.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
a Volvo, basically. That's your company car right there.
Yeah, says this as someone who doesn't have a license.
In any event,
yeah.
Do you want to move on to the fact or fiction there, Jurg, so we can do what your sweatshirt says in QC, question choices.
Exactly. So let's a quick fact or fiction here, and again, it's going to tie into the team that we're just about to briefly discuss here for the most part. Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook's been cut. Dalvin Tomlinson is done, so no more Dalvins in Minnesota. Apparently, they had a no Dalvins must remain policy.
Get out.
Kendricks has got a lot of pieces left Minnesota. Will Danielle Hunter, who his name has been mentioned now with the Dalvin Cook news, will Danielle Hunter be traded at some point by the deadline? Fact or fiction?
So I think this is an interesting question here, Justin. I do, because I think you can argue that it really depends upon how their schedule plays out. But Jurg and I went through the first 5 games of their schedule, and this is a team that could be, I think, at best 2-3, and at worst 1-4 in their first 5 games, because they host Tampa at week 1, then they go to Philadelphia week 2,
and that didn't go well last season.
They host the Chargers week 3. And then they go to Carolina week 4. And that could be a sneaky game, because if Bryce Young is truly the guy that we think that he's going to be, they could put up some numbers there, followed by hosting Kansas City in week 5. So,
by the way, Rick, Adam Thielen revenge game in that Panthers game.
That's right. Adam Thielen revenge game. Oh, and the Vikings also did just release 5 cornerbacks from their roster this season, offseason. So, I mean, the exodus on the funeral pyre of burning in Minnesota continue. I think it's a fact. I even say it's not even going to be it's going to be probably before week 1 of the season. I think it's going to be that quick, because I think once you to quote a Canadian wildfire, once you see smoke, there's fire. So you have to kind of find the way out. And Danielle Hunter is an excellent player, I think. Last year he had one of his better seasons, 65 tackles, 10.5 sacks. The guy has 71 sacks in his career, and he is an excellent bull rusher of the pass. He's only going to go into his age 29 season, so he's definitely still got a lot of motor there. And I think there are teams that will definitely need that, because they will definitely need some form of pass rushing in some capacity. And I think that this is a guy who will fit any mold. And I think the Vikings, if you've seen what they've done this year so far, I don't know. I don't think they're going to repeat their success in 2023. So I think this is a fact. I think he's traded. And I'd say it's even before week 1 of the season. I think he's gone in the offseason.
Here's the thing. Minnesota is very much tipping their hand at all times for these kinds of situations. I mean, it's the same reason why nobody traded for Dalvin Cook. They knew he was getting released. And I don't see what the reason is. You never hear anything about these locker room presence or negative effect on the team. He's played well. He's had a little bit of injury history, but I understand you don't want to pay him. They had the same thing with Danielle Hunter last year, and they couldn't find a trade partner. They restructured his deal, and he played. He's got 1 year left. I don't know if they're going to be able to find a trade partner. I think it's much more likely that they end up cutting him. So I'm going to say fiction, and not because he shouldn't be traded or because he wouldn't be a good fit or piece. I think a lot of teams would give up something for him, but I don't see why any team would make a deal with Minnesota right now when they're just releasing players. I'll take my shot signing him to a deal. You pay most of his contract. I'll sign him a deal and give up no assets.
Yeah. It's interesting that we've had this is now the 3rd guy we're mentioning that a team has been looking to trade for, and they haven't found a dance partner in the NFL offseason so far, because obviously Hopkins, there was no trade partner for the Cardinals. Dalvin Cook, there's no trade partner. And now Danielle Hunter, it seems.
DeAndre Hopkins was owed a lot.
Sure.
I think that's more of the reason why they couldn't find a trade partner, is because guys weren't taking on that deal, and the Cardinals were not making the move if they had to take on any money at all.
Mm-hmm.
If they cut him this year, I think they are completely off the cap next year.
Yeah,
with him. So
that's fair. I think that's fair.
Do you guys think, Justin, maybe perhaps because I think both Cook and Hopkins both had multiple years left on their deals. With Hunter having, you said if this is his contract
I think
year,
this is his last year, yeah.
Do you think there might be a bit of a better chance of a trade in this situation just because it is just the 1 year left as opposed to the other 2?
Let me look up his contract now.
Because I think I think it always depends on the situation. Like, so some teams only want to trade for a guy with 1 year left, and they'll be cool with it. But some teams want to get a guy that has multiple years left because you're giving up those assets for a guy who's going to be there potentially. I think that if we're just talking about how the NFL has trended with these last three guys, I think maybe it could play into Hunter's advantage that he only has 1 year left. So it's less of a burden for either side. They don't have to worry about that after this season. This is the season where the cap hit would affect you. And then past that, both teams are free. Unless the team that trades for him immediately wants to extend, which to each his own.
I think he does have years left. I think that he has 24 and 25, actually. He signed a 5-year extension at some point.
Are those voided? Are those voidable years where it's like a whole tricky thing with the cap and stuff, like with the Taysom Hill deal or with Rodgers and his deal and stuff?
Of course it is.
You know the salary cap, Jurg. It's a social construct.
No, I know. Wait, if we ever get merchandise made, that shirt is the first one being made.
I mean, that's not hard to do. We can absolutely have that made for sure. And then I will throw an RIP Sandoval on a shirt as well. So.
It says, so it's 2024 and 2025 years automatically void, 2.24 million of dead cap.
So basically he's a free agent after the season.
So yeah, I mean, technically it says, yeah, he's an unrestricted free agent in 2024. Yeah, I think teams would take the chance on look, if I'm the Jets, because you want me to take the Jets side, and you're telling me I could trade for him and he's going to be a $10 million hit on the salary cap this year, and I'll have that kind of pass rush, and I'll give up a 6th round pick for him. Sure. Why not? Is Minnesota accepting a deal like that?
Probably not.
Especially when they'll probably have to take on some of that contract.
Yeah, I would say not.
What are the odds that a team does anything more than that? Again, it's not that he's not worth that, but it's supply and demand. I mean, you could have $1 million gold watch, and if nobody wants it, what's it really worth? You know what I mean? If I think, listen, odds are you're probably just going to give it away for a few dollars anyways. I'll toss you a few dollars now. You don't want that? Fine, throw it out.
Yeah. Especially if it's a gold watch that says Rolex, where you can scratch the R a little bit and then it becomes a P and it says Polex instead of Rolex, because then frauds. Like the Vikings are frauds, absolutely. Jurg, I would say this has been a fun departure from your normal hosting duties at the trivia. So congratulations on that. And next week, get back to what you normally do, obviously. So go work there. But it does lead us to a very interesting discussion here. We did talk about this a little bit, and this was an expected move. That Dalvin Cook is gone for the Minnesota Vikings officially. He was cut on Friday. The move basically is a money move because the Vikings will save $9 million in cap space with the transaction. The Vikings are going to cut him after $10.4 million due in base salary this year, almost 12 and almost 13 last year. Dalvin Cook in his 6 years in Minnesota, 72 starts, almost 6,000 rushing yards, 47 touchdowns, also caught 221 passes for nearly 1,800 yards, and had 5 receiving touchdowns. The big key about this, though, gentlemen, is that Dalvin Cook only played a full 17-game season last year. That was his first full season playing. He had years where he had 14 games played and 13 games played, but the injuries do beg a question here. So, Justin, you kind of hit on it. So we know basically the reason why Dalvin Cook was let go because of the money. Because basically that's what ties everything together is the monetary value. From a Vikings standpoint, because if you look through recent draft history for the Vikings, it seems like they've been recruiting and drafting his replacement every year for the last 4 or 5 years. In 2019, they drafted Alexander Madison, who they just gave a 2-year, $7 million deal to be their feature back. And then in 2020 they didn't, but they drafted Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne. So, beggars can't be choosers. 2021, they drafted Kene Nwangwu, who has a career rushing yards of 75 with 6 receptions and 3 total touchdowns. And then last year, they drafted in the 5th round Ty Chandler out of North Carolina. And this year, they picked up one of our stars of the draft, Dwayne McBride, out of UAB in the 7th round. So this move has been kind of happening for a bit. But if you look at that Vikings running back room by committee, Madison's career rushing yards stand at 1,660. Dalvin Cook's best season was under 1,600 yards. So this is a massive downgrade for Minnesota. Do you think this will make Minnesota's offense more pass heavy, or will they try and figure out somebody in that running back room to shepherd most of the load, or will it be by committee, basically? What do you think?
Well, I definitely think they're going to move towards a more committee-like style. And I don't want to knock Alexander Madison because Alexander Madison has been there for a while. He fills in whenever someone gets injured, and he's played well in those games. It's just that he has not been the starter. Dalvin Cook, when he's healthy, has been able to be a bell cow back, so to speak, for them. He gets a lot of carries, he gets a lot of touches, and he does a lot for that team. I honestly don't understand this whole move. I mean, they were one of the most potent offenses last year. They only got better. They traded for Hawkinson halfway through the year. They drafted Jordan Addison. It doesn't make sense for me to make a move like this at this time unless you really think Alexander Madison can hold the load and is somehow cheaper. But even still, it just I believe is this his last year? Or does he have one more year left? I think he's got one more year left on the contract. He's not a huge cap hit. And it didn't make any sense to me that they would make this move at this time. And let me just say also, it does Dalvin Cook dirty because right now, obviously he's going to be the number one free agent running back, but there's a good number of big name free agent running backs that have not signed yet. So that really diminishes his value to other teams. I mean, maybe there's some sort of bidding war because he's the best one, but I mean, is it really that much of a drop off if you sign Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt or, I mean, even Zeke? So people are not going to, if I'm in Dalvin Cook's shoes, I'm not very happy with the Minnesota Vikings. But yeah, I think Madison can help and still be productive there. Does he have, a Dalvin Cook type season? I don't know, but I could see him having like 800-900 yards and maybe 400 or 500 yards receiving. I don't know if he hits double digit touchdowns. It depends on what they do around the goal line, but maybe they think he's healthier. I honestly don't know. I don't know what's happening in Minnesota right now. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, and then you look at this whole offseason of guys they've let go. You have Adam Thielen to Carolina, Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, went to the Chargers, Irv Smith to the Bengals, which, they had Hawkinson, so that's probably fair. They've lost 5 cornerbacks this year on the free agent market. Chris Boyd to the Cardinals, Cameron Dantzler to the Commanders, Chandon Sullivan and Patrick Peterson to the Steelers, and Duke Shelley to the Raiders. In addition to which, they also lost Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson to the Cleveland Browns. So their fire sale, like I said, has started with a big Viking funeral pyre in Minnesota.
Let me just say this. I'm not worried about losing anyone on that defense. Their defense was terrible last year.
Yeah.
It's the offense that I have an issue with. They were a top offense in the NFL. They need to capitalize on that scoring offense by putting together a good defense. And I don't know if dropping your number one running back, who is third all time on your running back list and is still under 20, what is he, 25, 26?
I think 27.
27.
Yeah.
He'll be 28 when the year starts. So he's a little older for running back. But still, he finally played a full season last year. He's been playing well. It's not like he had a bad year. I don't see why you're making a drastic move like this in this situation. You need to capitalize on having your older quarterback, your young wide receivers not being owed $1 million because Justin Jefferson is going to bankrupt that team next year.
Mm-hmm.
As he should. I'm not saying not, but it does not make any sense to make this move at this time, in my opinion, unless he was hurting you somehow. It's not even that they had an injury designation when they cut him.
Right. No, there's definitely nothing to it that makes any sense. And I do want to also say the Vikings did add some players in free agency this year, including Byron Murphy, he who almost fumbled the ball over the goal line in that Arizona-Vegas game in overtime. And Marcus Davenport, who the Saints never really knew how to use, being listed a 6'6", 265-pound guy as a linebacker, not a defensive end, which was his position in college. So that's a big question mark there. Jurg, to you. Let's go to the Dalvin Cook side of this. Let's talk about this. Justin's right in a sense where he said, he's going to be competing with a lot of free agent running backs that are out there. And we've talked about them over the past couple of weeks. Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Myles Gaskin, just to name a few guys there. If you're Dalvin Cook, there are some names that are out there of teams that are mentioning guys that are possibly, in the fold here. Miami's probably the most well-known target there because Dalvin Cook is from that area. He played high school at Miami Central, was born in Opelika. Buffalo's an option. My Bears are an option. And then you have Arizona and San Francisco. Of those 5, obviously I think Miami's number 1, I think, on the list. But of those 5, is there a sneaky team of those 5 that might use Dalvin Cook services to their advantage?
I think I saw another team mentioned earlier this week that you didn't bring up there that I think could make a strong push for him, and that's Denver. I think Sean Payton, if there's one thing we've seen from Sean Payton offenses, it's he likes a nice running back if he can get one. And with Javonte Williams coming off a torn ACL from last season and the need of strong running back support there still, I think Dalvin Cook to Denver would be a very valuable option where I could see maybe not the receiving numbers that he put up, but I could see Sean Payton trying to use Dalvin Cook to an extent and maybe pair him with Javonte like he had with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. I think Sean Payton, if there is a coach that Dalvin Cook could find his way to that would definitively know how to use him, I should think the Denver Broncos would be the team for him to go to in that essence. Now, downside to that, got to deal with Russell Wilson. Not an easy task for any man. And you just got cut from Minnesota. He's probably upset about that. And then you got to go play with Russell Wilson. Maybe not the best combination of things, but if we can get past that, which I want to think Dalvin Cook can, because like Dustin mentioned, this was not a cut made due to any injury concerns because he just came off a full healthy season. Like Justin said, there was no injury designation on Cook when they cut him. This is not a locker room thing. I think for all intents and purposes, for the most part, like no one said a single negative thing about Dalvin Cook in any way, shape, or form on that team. I think this is just a pure cap move. And I was just reading over it now is that the salary cap situation will take a massive bump for the Minnesota Vikings over the next couple seasons, as Justin mentioned, they're preparing for that Justin Jefferson contract, which will probably be higher than the net worth of some countries in, lower Asia and Africa. So ultimately, this was purely a cap move by Minnesota. Just to get that out the way. I think no further speculation is needed. This was just a pure cap move on their end. For Dalvin Cook, I think Denver would be a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they call him, and I think he should take serious consideration there, aside from me despising that quarterback aside. And I think of the teams you mentioned, I think Miami would be a pretty good one, although what would be interesting to me, and I actually thought about this earlier in the week, is that Kyle Shanahan, who we know to be good at, running back by committee, got a number 1 running back in Christian McCaffrey, and they made it work in San Fran. And Christian McCaffrey's looking good, and I think he's ready for a really good season here in 2023 with that team. Will Shanahan's protege and Mike McDaniel, will he be able to do something similar where it's running back by committee there? And ironically, it's a lot of former 49ers running backs in that locker room with Mostert and with Wilson. Can they get Dalvin Cook in there, and can that cohesiveness stay is my only question. If they can, I think it's a no-brainer because you mentioned it, Rick. This is a hometown kid. He played at FSU. Like he's known Florida basically his entire life. Dead. Yeah, unfortunately, he walked the plank temporarily. Dalvin Cook there would make a ton of sense, and I could see it. I think Denver and Miami would probably be my top 2 options for Dalvin Cook at this stage.
It does also bring up an interesting question here. If you're one of these teams that has a star on your offensive side that is going to get a ton of money, is it worth the sacrifice of gutting the rest of your offense to do so? We're going to see if that works in Minnesota because, again, Justin Jefferson is owed this big contract. Well, you just kind of got rid of his best foils in Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook. Now, KJ Osborne is still there for the Vikings. TJ Hawkinson is still there as well as a tight end. But that running back room, I mean, yes, Justin, you're right. Madison has been a guy that has stepped up when necessary to be the helper in injuries. But now he's got to take on more of the role here. So you almost have to wonder if you're a team looking at this, is this going to be the experiment you look at going forward to say, well, we saw how Minnesota basically cleared the way for Justin Jefferson to make all this money. And now look at how their offense suffered after this. Is there any credence to that, do you think?
That if their offense will suffer?
Well, or is that like could that be a trend moving forward?
It's been a trend in the NFL for a while now. People don't want to pay running backs. They don't. I mean, look how the Cowboys got crucified when they paid Zeke. And you gotta really argue it didn't really work out for them. They didn't get any better. They ended up losing Amari Cooper, which didn't make any sense to me considering he came out and said I would have been happy to restructure. But they are now, 4 years removed from that contract. He's not on that team. They never got any closer to a Super Bowl. And they're right back where they started, down a receiver. So I think it makes sense in terms of you're not going to pay Dalvin Cook. That's fine. And if he demands a trade at some point, or he demands a trade next year at some point, that's fine. What was his cap hit going to be this year? $5 million?
No.
Are you really cutting Dalvin Cook? You really have to cut Dalvin Cook to pay Justin Jefferson? Doesn't make any sense to me.
It didn't need to happen this season. I think
It didn't need to happen at all. If he's got 2 years left on his deal and he's owed $5 million and $3 million, or $5 million and $8 million, is that what's cutting into Justin Jefferson's deal?
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. There's any way you spin this right now, it's really truly not making sense to me.
Agreed.
Yeah. It's definitely cutting off the nose to spite the face, if you will.
Yeah.
And again, I think one big question. Yeah, go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
Obviously, they want to go in a different direction, but I don't understand where that direction is when you're coming off I would argue that maybe they were a top 5 scoring offense last year. They had a lot of points. They had a lot of yards. And even though Jurg thinks they're frauds because Kirk Cousins relies a lot on his skill position players, which is fair. They are.
They were.
Well, but that also then leads to this last question that I have. Justin, after seeing the offseason moves and after not understanding them, are you now on our side of thinking the Vikings are frauds?
I think they are exactly what I thought they were last year.
Okay, Dennis Green.
That is a really good offensive team. Yeah. They don't have anything on defense. I don't expect Kirk Cousins to win them any championships.
They have even less.
He'll keep them in the competition. It's a weaker division. They should still win the division. They're going to beat the teams that they should beat, and they're going to lose the teams that they shouldn't beat. If you're a better team, I'm not worried about going into Minnesota. I'm not worried about Minnesota coming here. Any team in the NFL could beat any team in the NFL on any given day. Sure. There are some that are more likely than others. And Minnesota is a team that if you're picking chalk, you're probably right.
And on any given day, of course, the Texans and Colts will play a game that won't end in a tie and cost you the league championship, which, that happens, of course. But
wow.
I think that the Vikings winning 12 games this year, I think, is not going to happen. They're not going to match their total from last year.
Well, they'll have a tougher schedule this year. They won their division.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because they, as we mentioned, Philadelphia, the Chargers, and Kansas City in 3 of their first 5 games. Then out of their bye in Week 12, they are hosting Vegas and Cincinnati, or they're going to Vegas and Cincinnati, I should say.
Look, they still play the Bears, the Lions, and the Packers twice. They should have at least 3 wins in there. If they don't split in their division, there's an issue.
Which I think
I would say they should go 4. Respectfully, I know the Bears got better. If the Vikings don't go 4-2 in that division, I think it's a problem.
So
exactly. Yeah. So, do you think they're going to win 5 other games out of the other 11?
Here's my thing with Minnesota, and obviously this is not our official predictions. That's what the division breakdowns are for, ladies and gentlemen, later in the summer. But I think the Vikings can still win this division, but it ain't going to be with 12 wins. Like I think.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't expect them to have the same win total as they did last year, but I could still expect them to win the division. I still expect them to have a winning record.
Yeah,
that's fair.
They're. I'm not sitting here saying that I expect them to light the world on fire. I don't expect them to go to the Super Bowl. I don't expect them to win a championship. I don't expect them in the NFC conference game. There's better teams in the NFC right now than the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
If it was purely an offensive game and they didn't have to play any defense, maybe that'd have them a little better.
They might be top 3.
Is terrible.
It's possible.
Their defense is terrible. They're well coached. Kirk Cousins is middle of the pack, upper middle of the pack quarterback. He's 34, 35 now. He's not getting any younger. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Why are you cutting skill position players? I don't get it.
That's another
highly productive skill position players that aren't owed a ton of money.
If your whole thing, because let's remember, boys, there was a lot of rumors going into the draft of would the Vikings try to get one of these quarterbacks that people thought were going to fall. Like, if you're Minnesota and you didn't end up really doing that, you didn't get Hooker, you didn't get Levis, who ended up falling. Like, it would have been the time we have the successor, and the next season we could pay Jets, but we could still keep Cook because now you got a quarterback on the rookie pay scale. And honestly, at a lower cap it because it wasn't a top pick. Like it, I think this has just been a completely botched situation by Minnesota management.
But see, Jurg, that's where you're wrong because the Vikings did draft their successor in the 5th round. They signed him to a 4-year, $4.2 million deal. That would be Jaron Hall out of BYU.
Let me repeat myself. You still don't have your successor.
Exactly, because what good are BYU quarterbacks in the 2020s? Zach Wilson, say hi.
Exactly. Like
again, if Kirk Cousins does get hurt, by the way, it's Nick Mullins is their backup right now. So,
oh God,
that does not inspire any confidence in me whatsoever for this season.
Yeah, I don't know what direction they are trying to turn. It doesn't.
It's like I go back to the Viking boat again. It's like they all have left turning oars and just spinning around in a circle right now, basically.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it goes.
There's
no communication whatsoever.
They're gonna hit some stone pillars in that archipelago eventually.
Ooh, love a good article.
My issue here is now you have a second-year GM, a second-year coach.
Mm-hmm.
What is your clear-cut direction? Are you drafting a quarterback next year? You don't even know. They've been signing Kirk Cousins to 1-year deals. They have a team full of skill position players and highly touted, receivers and things like that. But what direction is your team moving in? Are you going to reinforce the offense? Or are you going to take a rookie quarterback? Do you need to reinstall your offensive line? Are you going to start investing in the defense? The defense was horrendous last year. It's the reason why you didn't win 13 or 14 games. What is going on in Minnesota?
What's going on is they're still reeling from their loss to the Giants in the first round of the NFL playoffs. That's what's happening here. Let's move on from this conversation because Jurg did bring up the Denver Broncos, and I do want to go on to the other free agent signing that happened this week, which was Frank Clark of the Chiefs signing a 1-year, $5.5 million deal going to the Broncos after he was released back in March. Now, the money, again, Clark was signed to a 5-year deal in 2019 with the Chiefs for $105 million. And, of course, that's now meaningless and out the window. So they did an interview. Frank Clark did an interview with, I believe, Mile High Huddle, which is the Broncos beat reporting team. And he mentioned that there were 3 reasons why he wanted to go to Denver. So, boys, it's time to play 2 truths and a lie. The situation with Sean Payton is good for Frank Clark. I'd say that's the truth.
Yeah.
I get to play alongside Randy Gregory and stay in my division that I'm very familiar with. Somewhat true as long as Gregory's available to play, as long as he's not, injured or, doing what Colorado does best. And number 3, I want to help the Broncos get back to the mountaintop. I'd say that's the lie right there. I don't know what you guys think there. Let's talk about this for a second here because this does definitely help Denver's defensive side a little bit. It's an upgrade for sure. And again, it gives Sean Payton a nice little 1-2 punch on the defensive end. Jurg, I'll start with you. Frank Clark has been a playoff machine. In the regular season, though, he's been kind of a B+ defensive end.
Yeah.
Going to Denver, do you think that's going to help him, especially in a new defensive realm with their brand new defensive coordinator and brand new coaching staff as a whole? Because again, Ejiro Evero was gone. They hired a brand new defensive coordinator in Vance Joseph, who has some history with the Broncos, of course. And Sean Payton's there too. So do you think that this will help Frank Clark further and will help the Broncos further? What do you think?
I think it can help both. Like you mentioned, Frank Clark is very much a playoff performer. He's 3rd in the postseason in career sacks, which is just wildly absurd when you consider things. But that just also goes to show how often he's been in the playoffs. And I think getting a guy with that kind of playoff experience that's been deep in the postseason now multiple times with multiple teams in his career is a very valuable thing. I think that, him and Randy Gregory, like you kind of mentioned it there, Rick. I think Randy Gregory had a pretty quiet season for the most part, if I'm not mistaken, in Denver in year 1. I say so because I literally could not tell you off the top of my head how many sacks he'd had. I'd guess 6. He had 2.
12 tackles, 2 sacks.
Oh, Lord above. So he needs to get healthy. He needs to be fully there if this is really going to work out for them. But I will never say a change of scenery can't help a player because I think just sometimes that has to be the case. And like you said, he's very up and down in the regular season. But maybe, like you said, staying in that division with that team, with going up against those teams, I think will maybe be a confidence boost for him. And ultimately speaking, because the Broncos weren't the best last season, it's not the hardest schedule per se in theory. So Frank Clark could maybe make an impact. I think ultimately this should be a positive impact for this team. Now, will it be the swing of things? Who knows? Because ultimately, and I know he didn't have the greatest end to the season last season for Miami, but they traded away Bradley Chubb. And now it's all on that defense to very much heavily perform because, like we kept saying last season, the Broncos defense did their job. The Broncos defense was really good. And I always forget the number that Justin throws out there, but I think that the Broncos averaged, 18 points per game in the first 10 weeks of the season? They would have been, 8-2, 9-1?
Yes.
That's all they had. So you're talking about a defense that was pretty good, that lost a couple pieces, but the main one is arguably their DC. So I think any talent influx should be a positive. This should work out in Denver. Will it? I don't know, because it's all on that offense.
It's Denver, of course. Justin, on that defensive side, you mentioned it last year a lot of times, and it's absolutely accurate. This defense was a stalwart defense last year with guys like Nick Bonito, who was a rookie, Patrick Surtain, second on the secondary side. And in the draft, they got better because they added Drew Sanders, one of our top linebackers from our draft, and J.L. Skinner as well, the safety out of Boise State in the 6th round. They didn't really lose a lot of players. I mean, Ronald Darby was released, and so was Lamar Jackson, but that was really it, mostly for their main core guys on the defense. So if you're Denver, adding Frank Clark, do you consider that more of a luxury? Or if you look at the defensive line, is it the big upgrade they need? Is he now the number one unquestioned leader on that D-line? Because they have Gregory listed as a linebacker. So where do you think he will find himself on that D-line?
That's a good question. And Jurg, they would have won 6 more games if they scored 18 points a game in regulation. I mean, it's definitely more of a luxury. It's the rich getting richer. Their defense was excellent last year. They held a ton of teams down, especially in the beginning of the season. What they need help with is on offense, which I think that the coaching might help them going forward. I think Sean Payton will be very good there. That being said, I mean, he's got to be. Let's look at their depth chart here real quick, because I want to see exactly where these guys will fit in, because it definitely pushes back. Where's Randy Gregory?
He's an offensive linebacker. That's what he listed at. So their defensive ends here are Zach Allen, who they just got from the Cardinals, Elijah Garcia, Jonathan Harris, Matt Henningsen, Jordan Jackson, and Ioma Uwazurike. None of those people scream Pro Bowl candidates to me. I don't know what you think.
Look, I think that Pro Bowl candidates, besides the top guys, look, you want to tell me that they don't have a all-time top guy that's going to be the Von Miller of that defense, and they're gonna see all of the great things that they accomplish. Fine, but they can be a top defense and not have these guys. I mean, they led the league in sacks last year, and they just added Frank Clark. So I expect them to get after their quarterback. I expect offensive lines to struggle. Their secondary is strong. They're young in their secondary. I don't really see how. I mean, maybe they're expecting to score 17 points a game again, and they needed to hold their teams down a little bit more. I believe they were among the top defenses last year in points per game.
I just want to hammer this point home for you here, too. All the guys that I mentioned, all those defensive ends combined, have 215 NFL tackles. Frank Clark has 263 by himself.
Lord above.
Yes, exactly.
If they had kept Draymond Jones and they hadn't lowballed him, which you're freaking owned by Walmart now. I guess Walmart is used to underpaying people, but you're owned by Walmart now. There should be no excuse that this team is not doling out money to keep proper guys.
There's a cap.
Yeah,
it's a construct.
Of course, it's a construct. Everything's a construct, but you still have to fit in the confines of the cap. You have to find ways to restructure and get guys the money that you paid and still be within the cap.
And good teams have been able to do that over the last couple of years.
There's only so much you can do it, and there's only so much that you can restructure.
Or they need better capologists. I think they just need better capologists.
I will say, too, to the point you guys both made about Denver's schedule because of how poor they were last year, they opened the season at home for the first 2 games against Vegas and Washington before going to Miami for week 3.
Realistically, they should.
But again, I mean, realistically speaking, they could go 2-3 in their first 5 games because after those 2 games, they're at Miami, then they're at Chicago, which is a loss. We all know this. And then they host the Jets, which is also a loss because, Justin's team. So they are going to get the rigmarole, nice word there, of our teams on this podcast because they play the Bears, the Jets, and Jurg's Vikings.
Oh, my God.
So we'll see. I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have. And again, we'll see how Frank Clark plays out with that team. But
I will say this really fast. If you're going to force me to pick between Minnesota and Denver, my hatred for Russell Wilson far outweighs me loving to troll Minnesota on a weekly basis.
I'm going to force you to spin the wheel of chaos next week because we're going on to a brand new channel, and therefore we need to get all the bells and whistles out there for the crowd to see. Basically, that's how things are going to go.
Do I get a bracket of teams to become a fan for like you did?
Yes, you do. Absolutely. And the Hadrian Potter final will decide it all. Nice. Moving on to our main meat and potatoes of this week's episode here. NFL columnist Adam Shine brought out an interesting list of his 9 guaranteed risers, which are guys that he thought had a rougher year last year that will bounce back and have a better year this year. And so we're going to play a little game of factor cap with this list. Is the shine there, or is it just a fake, like fool's gold, basically, if you will? And I had an order that we were going to start off with, but since we talked about the Broncos briefly, 2 of these guys on this list were former or current Denver Broncos. So we're going to start off with Bradley Chubb. So Bradley Chubb was acquired last year before the deadline in a blockbuster deal, and then he also got a 5-year, $110 million extension from Miami. He only had 3.5 sacks in 9 games with Miami, including the postseason. Now, he was pretty banged up health-wise, so essentially the idea is that he's now reunited with Vic Fangio, his DC from Denver. So you got to think that might help him out further here. Adam Shine has Bradley Chubb going up for 13 sacks this season for Miami. Boys, either you want to take it. Factor cap. Bradley Chubb will have a better season this year. Obviously, 3.5 sacks. 4 is a better year than last year. But will he hit Adam Shine's magic number of 13 sacks this year?
I certainly hope not.
Well, as a Jets fan, of course, yes. If he had 13 sacks in every game except for the ones against the Jets, Justin, let's just put that qualifier out there. Do you think that's accurate?
I do think he has a better year. Oh, excuse me. I don't know if he has 13 sacks. That seems like a very high number. I don't even know if he gets double digits. I wouldn't be surprised if he has something like 8 or 9. He'll get close. I do expect him to have a little bit more relevance in a defense that he's a little bit more familiar with now. But 13 seems very high.
Yeah, I think let's not forget that the Dolphins were the worst defensive team going into last season's playoffs. And it showed because realistically, they actually scored enough on Buffalo to win. It's just their defense got absolutely shredded by that bozo that's now a Madden cover athlete. I think that it's very realistic to expect better from Chubb this year, in part because I don't really think there's he has to be the main guy on that pass rush. He needs to be the guy to lead that pass rush, to lead that unit. And this is a guy who had a lot of promise coming out when he was drafted. I think he was drafted 5th overall, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So this is a guy who came in with a pedigree, who had a couple injury-riddled seasons in Denver, but for the most part, him and Von Miller were a pretty good duo before Von Miller ultimately got traded. And now it's him in Miami. You need to be the guy there. And I think he doesn't have a choice. You need to perform. I'm kind of with Justin. I think 13 might be a little too high because I think what Chubb could do, if he could become a guy that can draw the double teams every once in a while on that line, and if he can open up his other guys, he can finish with 10 sacks for me, and I'll be cool with it because if we go via advanced numbers and he was able to, by getting some doubles, free up his other guys to get sacks, I'm cool with that. But I think the minimum should be 9 or 10 sacks. If he does anything less than that, it's a disappointment.
I think that's fair. I think 10 sacks is a pretty fair number for him to hit. Going to a current Bronco here, Adam Shine also lists a guy we've talked about a number of times on this podcast before in the past few weeks, Jerry Jeudy, as a guy who he thinks could have a better season. Now, Jeudy last year, despite Denver being an absolute dumpster fire, had career highs in catches, yards, and touchdowns. 67 catches for 972 yards and 6 TDs. Brand new offensive system with Sean Payton. Now, Adam Shine did mention this, Jurg, just so you can get this out of your system. It said, if Russell Wilson truly is cooked, then the Broncos did aggressively get Jarrett Stidham out of free agency. So maybe Jarrett Stidham is the key to unlocking Jerry Jeudy's potential because Russell Wilson is just dangerous and terrible. So, but here's the thing too. It's hard almost, I think, for a guy to go off the career highs that he had the year prior. And again, those were good numbers. Judy can do better, but there's still that Courtland Sutton question in Denver. Tim Patrick is now back. It's a brand new offensive system. Maybe Dalvin Cook goes there, and that could change everything. Does Jerry Jeudy have a better year this year than last year? What do we think?
Well, the question is, can he stay on the field? Because it's not that we haven't seen the production when he's been there. Although, I mean, I guess there was a little bit of a drop off in his early Russell Wilson games, but he has trouble staying on the field. He always seems to have some sort of nagging injury that makes him miss a consistent amount of games. So if he can get in a rhythm and he could stay healthy in that offense and they can protect him from what seems to be himself, maybe, then yeah, I think he can have a better year. I don't think it's saying a lot. He hasn't really done much so far in his NFL career, but it's all going to be a matter of, can he stay on the field?
I will say, to be fair to him, rookie season, the last year where there was 20, in 2020, his rookie season, the last season where there was 16 games played, he did play all 16. He started 14. And this past year, he only missed 2 games. It was mainly his second year, where 2021, he only played in 10, started in 5. So I think that is worth noting with him. I'll say yes, because I think I'm still not fully convinced Courtland Sutton can't be dealt by the time the season starts. There's just something nagging in my head that I think Courtland Sutton could still get dealt. And if that is the case, he becomes the number 1 wide receiver on that team definitively. And even if he doesn't, even if he is the number 2 guy going into the season, that's a pretty good number 2 supported by a pretty good number 1. And I think with Sean Payton there, yes, it's a new offense, but I think it should cater to what Jerry Jeudy can do. This is a guy that can get off the line of scrimmage really well, who's pretty good at catching deep passes, career average 14.6 yards per reception in his career. That's a guy that can do damage for you. And I think you mentioned it, Rick. Like it's kind of a meme at this point, but I think this is all on Russell Wilson. Like, you complained for so many years about your situation in Seattle. What is the excuse? Tell me what the excuse is now in Denver, where we have a head coach that's much better tailored just for your play style, because he played with a quarterback of your stature. Even if you're not the same athletically, you're still more athletic than what Drew Brees was at the end of his career. That's not a high bar. I'm pretty sure Billy Shakes is more athletic than what Drew Brees was at the end of his career.
Did you see the way he fell? That's great athleticism.
Exactly. I think that there's no excuse for Russell Wilson. I think Jerry Jeudy's success is going to be based off of what that dude can do. And if he's going to be on Mr. Unlimited and focus on his Subway sandwiches coming back and stuff, I don't know if they are or not. I'm just assuming. Like, if he's going to be focused on that more so, then yeah, no, Jerry Jeudy's screwed, just like every single wide receiver in that goddamn room. But I think for a guy entering 2023, a contract year, because I don't remember off the top of my head if his 5th-year option got picked up. Like,
I think it did. Yeah.
This is a guy that's, even with it being picked up, is essentially playing for his big money deal here. And
yeah,
if there's one incentive we've seen in sports that can get guys going to play well, it's the promise of a payday if you perform. So I think the expectation would be he gets his first 1,000 career yard receiving career yard 1,000 receiving yard career. He's gonna get 1K yards. I can't figure it out. I can't figure that sentence out. He will get 1K yards this season. Let me lock that in.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Lock that one in. And I have to correct you on one pronunciation. It's Mr. Unlimited, not unlimited. Unlimited.
You're unlimited.
I know. Speaking of the limits, another guy on this list that actually ties in very well for our first discussion of the day is James Cook, the younger brother of Dalvin Cook, who's on the Bills. His first NFL carry, gentlemen, I don't know if you remember this, prime time against the Rams, week 1, opening night, he fumbled the ball. So anything's better than that in theory. Now, this is a guy who was drafted in the 2nd round by the Bills in 2022, who has a very easy time going into Ken Dorsey's offense. But the Bills did add in free agency Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. And remember, they got Nyheim Hines last year for Zach Moss in that trade of running backs. So there's 4 guys there because Devin Singletary is gone. He's now in Houston. So the call here is that James Cook is going to be the feature back, the number 1 guy, and the straw that stirs the drink, according to Adam Shine. What drink? An egg cream, maybe? I don't know. But regardless, with Josh Allen being the Madden cover athlete, though, the offense still runs through him, in theory. So James Cook, prime for a breakout year. Factor cap.
I got to say cap on that one. I think if they were confident in him, I don't think they would have made the running back acquisitions they would have. Harris, I'm fine with, because then I think Cook and Harris would be the proper 1-2, and then Hines is there for the specialty stuff. I think Latavius Murray being added, it just screams to me that they weren't necessarily confident in him going into the season to even be the number 2 back. So I think there's just a little bit too now. Again, and obviously we don't hope for this, but this is a realistic thing, especially with NFL training camp, because these guys get hurt to hell in a handbasket during this time of year. There could be an injury that happens in front of him. Like that's a very real possibility. And running backs, as we have already discussed, don't always get the shine. But it's also Josh Allen always eats up those carries, and he's probably going to try to overperform because he needs to somehow convince Haley Steinfeld to stay with him. I don't see this being the year for Cook, unfortunately. Maybe in year 3 if things clear up a little bit, but not this year.
By the way, just before you go, quick dating tip for all the gentlemen watching: never go out to a fancy restaurant in a white T-shirt and jeans. Who do you think you are? Ridiculous.
Yeah, just don't.
Never. If I did that on date 1 with my wife, there wouldn't be a date 2. That's very simple right there. Justin, to you now. James Cook. Obviously, Buffalo's offense is Josh Allen centric, but if they are going to be better than they were last year, because we all remember the Cincinnati game and how disastrous the results were of that, James Cook, you would think, has to take a step forward. But is this offense too limited, see the word play there, to use James Cook in the way that Adam Shine thinks that he will be used?
I think that you'll definitely see an improvement upon what he did last year. Now, is that improvement a couple hundred yards and maybe 3 or 4 more touchdowns? Or is he going to be 1,000-yard rusher and he's going to have double digits? And, I expect him to do well. I do expect him to take a step forward. I know that fumbling was an issue last year. It's got to be something he's worked on in the offseason, because that is in the notes. That's in teams will know that's what's happening. But that being said, I do think that he could be one of these 800-yard running backs, split carries with Damian Harris, keep some pressure off of Josh Allen, which will maybe hopefully stop him from forcing balls into tight windows and throwing turnovers. And if that's the kind of improvement that he has and he ends up with 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, is Buffalo really complaining?
I think that would help them out considerably. By the way, just a fun fact here: if James Cook does rush for 1,000 yards, he'd be the first Buffalo Bill running back to hit that mark since Shady McCoy in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have thought to go farther back to Fred Jackson or someone like that.
Well, it's funny too, because there was a period of time from 02 to 05 where they had 2 running backs run for back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons: Travis Henry and Willis McGahee.
Nice.
Yeah. So there you go. Nice little fun name drops there for you there. Let's go ahead now to 2. We're going to take 2 guys together because their situations are very similar here. Adam Shine ranks Quentin Nelson of the Colts and Ike Ekwonu of the Panthers on this list. Very similar scenarios because brand new head coaches and brand new quarterbacks under center here. We saw this week Bryce Young was elevated to the number 1 QB in Carolina. And obviously Anthony Richardson, their thinking is the guy to go to Indy, although Gardner Minshew is still there. Now, last year, Ike Ekwonu had a 10-game stretch where he did not allow a sack for Carolina. So he's clearly getting better. He got better as the rookie season went along. So that would be a huge key for him. Quentin Nelson's year was just weird, man, last year with Matt Ryan and with Frank Reich there, and it was not exactly ideal. He was hurt a bit, and yet he still made his 5th Pro Bowl. But, again, they were 4-12-1. Some of us wanted them to be 4-11-2, but we'll save that shot for another day. Of the 2 guys here, Quentin Nelson and Ike Ekwonu, does it really tie into more how the quarterbacks perform and how they work under their new offensive sets? Because Frank Reich in Carolina and Shane Steichen in Indy are going to bring in 2 different ideas on how to run the offense. And you got to think that these 2 tackles and offensive linemen are going to be the swing guys to keep those guys protected. So it's hard to say they'll have better stats than next year, because what does that mean? More pancakes? Pancakes, by the way, I'm very hungry, so we don't do that. But regardless, is that what we're talking about here, or is it less sacks allowed? Of those 2 guys, Jurg, I know you're chomping at the bit. What do you think?
I'm confused why Quentin Nelson's on this list, because even if you take away the Pro Bowl appearance last year, this dude has made 4 All-Pro teams in his career and is a 4-time Pro Bowler, even if you take that away.
So here's why he's on the list here. By Nelson's own account, he did say this, and I quote, he told Zach Keefer of The Athletic in January this: "I give up a decent amount of pressure. I need to be better in one-on-one protection. Everything is fixable. I need to have my best year next year, and it starts with the offseason." So, yes, Quentin Nelson did have all these great stats. I think he only had 5 sacks this year, but he's thinking in his own mind he can do better. which he
Well, 'cause
probably could.
well, props to Quentin Nelson. He has high standards for himself. He expects greatness from himself. I respect that. I don't expect anything from myself on a daily basis, so
No.
that tells the difference between myself and him. Like Quentin Nelson is a guy who's had success in this league. Quentin Nelson is a guy that like
He's not a breakout candidate.
yeah,
He's
He's
among
not.
the top
he's
tackles.
already established. He's one of
He's not. Yeah.
no. Here's the thing: he should not have to be the left tackle on that team if they knew how to find Anthony Costanzo's replacement. He's been a guard his entire career. He is one of the best guards of this generation already, bar none. Like he should not have to. He should not have to be left tackle. He should be staying at left guard. The only thing I'm going to say with it, he should not be on this list. He should
Mutiny on the list. Mutiny on the list.
Mutiny on the episode, mutiny in the title, mutiny on the chaos, mutiny on this list. He should not be on this list.
So Quentin Nelson, take him off the list. Let's talk about Ike Ekwonu then.
Yes,
because top 10 pick last year,
Yeah.
a guy who we thought was going to be a good tackle, had some rookie struggles, but again, that 10-game stretch without allowing a sack, we didn't know who the quarterback was. It was probably like a scarecrow at some points back behind him, obviously.
Probably.
But again, new offensive system with Frank Reich, new quarterback to protect in the number 1 overall pick. And look at that division.
Yeah.
It's not exactly murderer's row over there.
Yeah, it's not like aside from Cameron
it's
Jordan.
misdemeanor alley.
Aside from Cameron Jordan there, I can't think of a single pass rusher that I would necessarily fear for my life of having to face. Maybe Shaq Barrett in Tampa if he's fully healthy. Yeah, no, I think Ekwonu should be taking that next step because if he is expected to be the franchise left tackle of the future on that team, like this is what franchise left tackles have to do. They have to have stretches like that where they go 10 games in a row without allowing a sack, let alone even some quarterback pressure. So Ekwonu, again, it's an expectations versus results thing. I think it might take him a little bit because it is a new coach, but I also think Frank Reich has found some pretty good success in his career when it comes to pretty good offensive tackles and offensive linemen in general. He's worked with Quentin Nelson, who we just mentioned and took off this list. He's worked with Lane Johnson. He's worked with Anthony Costanzo. He's worked with some amazing guys in his career, and he's had some pretty good offensive line coaches as well, I believe. So I think very much so. Like if we're saying expectations based, yes, Ekwonu should have, even if he's not voted into it, he should be someone who is considered for making the Pro Bowl this season because he is that kind of physically gifted, had all the that raw talent coming out, and for the most part, like you said, played pretty well in his role for not knowing who the hell was behind him. I think Sandoval and Billy Shakes were trying out for training camp.
Sandoval, Billy Shakes, the Cowardly Lion from the Wizard of Oz. It didn't really matter who was back there.
Yeah.
Justin, obviously, when we did our draft, you had Charles Cross, and you got that pick correct, and he seemed like a pretty good standout pick for the Seahawks this year. Who do you think takes a bigger step forward of those two guys, Cross or Ekwonu? What would you think about that?
I would say probably Ekwonu. I just think there is more room for him to move up. Cross had a very good rookie season. Ekwonu did too. He did not give up a ton of sacks, but he did have a decent amount of penalties, which you're looking for him to clean up now. It's a new offensive system. It is an offensive based. It's going to have an offensive mindset now on that team with Frank Reich and all the guys they brought in there. He's going to have to protect Bryce Young. Bryce Young, he's that little guy now. If they want him to succeed, they're going to need Ekwonu to step up. So I think he does. I think that he only got better throughout the season last year. There was a little bit of a learning curve. He was still on the Panthers, and I expect the Panthers to take a step forward this year. I do think that they have an easier schedule, and yeah, I could see him taking that step.
All right, I think so too. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to see how Carolina handles the NFC South division, if you will. Moving on to the next guy on this list. I'm just going to take this one solo. So lay out here, DJ Moore. Yes, moving on. I'm kidding. So DJ Moore, according to this list, wasn't the problem in Carolina. Obviously, it was the bad quarterback play. He had 888 yards receiving last year, 63 catches, and 7 total touchdowns. This is his year number 6. Adam Shine, who we're already discounting because of the Quentin Nelson thing, has him down here for, hold on to your butts, 1,200 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns in a Justin Fields system. Now, again, DJ Moore is a guy who did have 3,000-yard receiving years with Carolina, but is Chicago really built for that type of a receiving breakout from one of their guys? It would be arguably the best receiving season for a Bears wideout since Brandon Marshall was there, or even going back to the Caleb Haney years, God help us. So DJ Moore, the hype here is you were traded for the number 1 overall pick. So by proxy of, all things being equal, you have to be either equal or better than Bryce Young is in his first year to make the trade actually mean something. So is DJ Moore going to be that guy? Do we think DJ Moore truly is going to be that number one star. I think yes for Chicago because they needed number one receiver for a while, and it pairs them well with Chase Claypool. But I don't know. I mean, that this is a pretty high bar for a Chicago Bears wide receiver to think. I know you guys want to jump in here and then say anything about DJ Moore, or am I just on my own island here with this, like me and Billy Shakes?
No, I
How
don't
many yards
think
did he say he was going to have?
1,200.
I just don't see it. I mean, that's
I
more
don't
than
either.
half of the passing yards Justin Fields had in total last year. I
Yeah.
expect them both to take a step. I don't know if I expect DJ Moore to take a step forward. I expect DJ Moore to be DJ Moore, who's always been that like good receiver. He's a playmaker. He can win you a few games. Is he 1,000-yard consistent receiver? I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised if he hit it this year, but I just Justin Fields has to show me something more when it comes to passing the ball. Started to come on a little bit towards the end last year, but he opened it up a lot with his run game, and he's not the consistent passer that you look for, excuse me, in the NFL today. So, I mean, they're doing their best to put him in position to do that, but he's going to have to really work on his game, and he's really going to have to take a step forward passing the ball before we see DJ Moore have that kind of number.
Yeah, I think a lot of it ties in with that too. Jurg, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it ultimately is, can Justin Fields be better than what we've seen in his career, which is a sub 60% completion percentage. Let's be real here. That's what the case is. But do I think DJ Moore has the talent to eclipse those numbers? Absolutely. This is a guy who not just 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 3 straight 1,100-yard seasons, and those seasons were 1,175, 1,193, and 1,157.
Mm-hmm.
Collectively, he was a couple extra yards away in every single season, maybe like 2 to 3 catches each one, of having 3 straight 1,200-yard seasons.
Yeah.
The biggest thing will be the touchdown totals. Last season was his career high in touchdowns in 7, because before that, it was 3 straight years of 4 touchdowns in a row. Good God, Carolina had no quarterbacks for a while.
None.
Right? I think DJ Moore can do it, and maybe you mentioned bringing him in, Rick. I think part of the reason why DJ Moore was brought in is to help Justin Fields become that better passer, where I think the expectation is that DJ Moore, unlike in Denver, where I think it's solely on Russell Wilson to make use of his weapons, I think the expectation, whether you think it's unfair or not, because Justin Fields should take this next step on his own to an extent, I think the expectation is DJ Moore helps bring those numbers up because of his talent, because the idea is not necessarily throw it up there and DJ Moore will catch it. I don't think he's at that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase level, but I think he can make a few of those kinds of catches. And I think that is the ultimate expectation. But for a guy who's had 3 straight 1,100-yard receiving seasons before, I very much think he can do it. And maybe he needs to be the guy to help Justin Fields realize what he can do. So
the one thing I will say is if he takes away touchdowns from Cole Kmet, I'll be very angry.
I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
Is Justin Fields the best quarterback that DJ Moore has ever played with?
Ooh,
God.
Oh, that's a good question.
Because if he's not, then why do you expect him to have the best season that he's ever had?
Well, no, he might be. He's played with PJ Walker.
Well, 2018 Carolina was Cam Newton, but
that was at the end of his career.
Yeah, that was the end of it. 2019 Carolina was Cam Newton on the IR, so Kyle Allen. So we're already off to a great start here so far. 2020 Carolina was Bridgewater and Walker. So, say what you will about XFL MVP PJ Walker, but, 2021 was Darnold and Walker and Newton. And then obviously last year was the revolving door of, the ghost of Jake Delhomme. So,
AKA Baker Mayfield.
So technically speaking, yes, I guess he's the best quarterback that he's played with because Cam Newton on the downturn and then PJ Walker and Kyle Allen?
If Cam Newton's broken carcass is the best quarterback DJ Moore has played with, then I don't think it's too much out of the stretch of the imagination to say Justin Fields is probably number 2 comfortably on that list.
I'd say so. I'd give it a shout there.
And I don't want to hear if Sam Darnold has a good season in San Fran. I don't want to hear, well, what about Sam Darnold? Because he didn't do that in Carolina.
Well, or with the Jets.
He was hurt a lot last year.
He was seeing ghosts in New York too.
Right.
Mono and all that. That's true. He was hurt as well as here too.
I think, my bad, Rick. I think one thing I've said on the show before is that I think we need to realize when wide receivers help out situations a little bit more than what we give them credit for.
Yeah.
And I think Stephon Diggs has been a great help for Josh Allen in Buffalo. And I think DJ Moore Not the same level of impact, not the playoff appearances in the NFC title game, not at that level, but can he help make Justin Fields better? I definitively think he can.
Yeah. 3 more names on this list, boys. I've said the best 3 for last year. Travis Etienne out of Jacksonville. Now, he lost his rookie year with the Lisfranc injury. Last year, he had 1,125 rushing yards and caught 35 passes, but only found the end zone 5 times in Jacksonville's offense. Now, Trevor Lawrence does love Etienne because they were teammates in college. Jacksonville's offense is explosive, is young, and Calvin Ridley's going to join the fold this year. So things are going to get a lot of interesting here. According to Adam Shine, he sees 12 to 15 touchdowns, 1,300 rushing yards, and 50 carries. Now, that is a 2 to 3 times clip of more touchdowns for ETN, I guess combined or whatever the case is. But listen, when Travis Etienne was drafted, I thought that he was going to be the next great Jacksonville running back. And last year he proved it. But the touchdown numbers are concerning. The question is, in this offensive system, will he be the guy to get more touchdowns? Because Trevor Lawrence is definitely the big home run player. He definitely goes for the home run ball all the time. So what do we think? ETN, more explosive this year than last?
I think he can. I think when you have a number 1 wide receiver like Christian Kirk, you got to feed him the ball in the end zone, Rick. But in all seriousness, I think that probably is the main aspect of his game he needs to get better at in terms of finishing down in the red zone. I mean, he could get them there, definitively. Now, can he finish is the question. But I definitely think he can. I think that look, last season, I think you guys as well opened my eyes to just how talented Travis Etienne really was and how good of a season he was having. I think he's talented. I think maybe that injury his rookie year was the best thing to happen to him because it gave him an extra year to learn the playbook before he actually had to play. And God knows he missed out on the whole Urban Meyer debacle directly. So that made him a better man automatically. I think ultimately Travis Etienne is expected to be the running back of the future on this team. And when they sign him to a 4-year extension down the line and cut him with 2 years left, even though they don't have to, we'll be revisiting the conversation. But
and then he'll end up on the Patriots because that's where all good running backs go to die.
Absolutely.
Corey Dillon, say hi.
Yes. Travis Etienne, I think of all the guys we've mentioned, I think this is the one I'm most confident in having a banger of a year this next season.
Yeah, Justin, what do you think about Travis Etienne's upcoming performance this year? I think the numbers are a little high, but what do you think?
Well, what were the numbers again?
They were 12 to 15 touchdowns and 1,300 rushing yards and 50 catches.
Well, so I expect him to have more of an impact in the receiving game this year. We also got to remember they went into the season last year with James Robinson really being the guy there for a while. Obviously to get his value up because they knew they were going to move him. And towards the middle of the season, Etienne started to have those touchdown numbers. And if you remember, he got a little banged up. I don't think he missed any games, but he was leaving. His carriers went down. So I do expect him to come on. I do expect him to have touchdowns a little bit earlier this year. Is he going to have 13? I don't know. But if you gave me an under-over of 8 or 9, I'm picking the over.
I think that's a fair shot there. By the way, I poetic justice, James Robinson is on the Patriots now. 2-year, $8 million deal where all the great running backs go to die. Second to last name on this list. This is an interesting one because this is probably a guy who I would say had the greatest sophomore slump, I think, in recent NFL history. And a lot of it wasn't really his fault. He did go to a brand new offense with, a hurt knee. He had knee surgery in November, but this is a guy who had 1,000 yards receiving in his rookie season and only ended up getting 356 last year. He was the highest drafted tight end in all of football history, Kyle Pitts on the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Desmond Ridder is what he is. Taylor Heineke is lurking in the background. You have Drake London and Bijan Robinson there too, as well, to make this Atlanta team go. And again, like the Carolina discussion, this is a wide open NFC South division here. So Justin, Kyle Pitts, it's easy to say, yeah, he'll have more receiving yards. Will he go back to his rookie form from his first year, over 1,000 yards receiving? Or is this a question for Atlanta's quarterback room and offensive scheme? Because again, is Desmond Ridder truly the answer? What do you think?
So I don't know if Desmond Ridder is truly the answer. But that being said, I do expect him to have a better year. I mean, he only played in 10 games last year. His highest receiving total was 5 catches for 80 yards. I'm sorry, 5 catches for 87 yards. So, look, I expect him to be more of a target in the end zone. I expect him to be closer and more around the end zone more often this year. And I do expect him to do better. But I don't necessarily have a ton of confidence in that offense. I mean, they keep adding weapons. They keep adding running backs and wide receivers, and they still have no quarterback there. And look, Heineke might be an improvement eventually, but is he the guy that's going to win you? Is he the guy that's going to light up defenses? He's not the guy, I think, that's going to lead you to a division crown this year. So I don't think it's by much. I do like Kyle Pitts long term. I do think he's going to have an excellent career in the NFL. Not sure at this point if it's going to be with Atlanta.
So that's an interesting point there too. That's a big question. So if Kyle Pitts has a better year this year, Jurg, and Atlanta does nothing this year, if they don't compete like we think they're going to for the NFC South, which again, maybe the most wide open of all the divisions in the NFL, is there a chance that he is on the move because he wants to play for a contender?
Maybe. I think it's always a difficult conversation to have in that regard because I think the NFL is I think it's between the NFL and MLB. Basically any non-NBA league here in North America. It's tough for guys to get their way out of a situation simply enough via demanding a trade. Like Kyle Pitts could demand a trade and Atlanta could be like, okay, we're not going to. Like that's very much what could likely be the case there.
Yeah.
I think the question ultimately is, does Arthur Smith find a way to use him again like he did 2 seasons ago? Because I don't think even when he was out there, to Justin's point, I don't think they were able to figure out how to get Kyle Pitts in the best possible spots last season. And I think I'm with Justin. I think Kyle Pitts is talented. I think he should be a guy that eclipses 1,000 yards again in his career in the first season. I don't know if it's happening this year, and I don't know if it's happening with this team. I think Arthur Smith, forget the talent that they have, forget even winning that division. If the guys on this team don't put up numbers, I think Arthur Smith's job needs to come in consideration. Because what have I always said about young teams on this show that may be bad? You want to see growth and progression out of your guys. You want to see them get better. If Kyle Pitts does not put up at minimum 800 yards this season, if Bijan isn't threatening 1,000 rushing yards, and if Drake London isn't surpassing what he did last season, I think Arthur Smith's job has to be in question. And I think that's the biggest thing here.
Which, to be fair, one of us was calling for his job last year. Justin, looking at you, you were the one who mentioned Arthur Smith's job was in flux last year. So
he fired half of the NFC South. He fired half of the NFC South, and I fired the other half because I was the one calling Bowles and Dennis Allen into question.
And I fired Matt LaFleur for no good reason, but he should have been. All right.
I mean, you might be 1 year early on that, is the thing. Right?
Exactly. Last name on this list by Adam Shine, which I think this is like a C- list, basically. To be honest with you, I'm going to call him out right now.
Yeah, we did better last year with our list.
We did. Well, again, we can have our own list in weeks to come, and we'll just blow this one out of the water like a cannonball.
Absolutely.
Pirate. So this name on the list, I think, is going to be the most divisive because I think one guy here has this guy ranked a little bit higher in his positional rankings than we did. And Adam Shine mentions this. It's a quarterback. Adam Shine mentions this guy will throw for 4,500 yards this year and 40 touchdowns while reducing his total of interceptions by 5 because Mike McCarthy is calling the plays on offense. Adam Shine's list started with the number 1, Dak Prescott. He thinks that Dak Prescott is throwing 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns with 10 interceptions or less this year. So, Jurg, you and I just lay out for a second here because if I recall this correctly, Justin had Dak Prescott relatively high in his QB rankings, I think. So I think you'd be in lockstep with this, Justin. What do you think about Dak Prescott rebounding from last year to throw those types of numbers this year?
How many touchdowns was it?
40.
That 40 touchdowns is a lot of touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him having 4,000 yards, 4,500 yards. He's done it before. He's had one season where he was close to 40 and he was still 3 touchdowns down. I don't see it happening there. And I will say that Dak Prescott a lot of the interceptions last year, I do think were tip balls. Not all of them, but there were a few that were not his fault. And he had a decent year for missing the games that he did. I mean, what he played in? He played in 12 games last year.
12,
And
yes.
yeah, he still had 23 touchdowns and almost had 3,000 yards. So I expect that Cowboys offense to be a little tighter this year. I expect them to have a little bit more in terms of efficiency. I think that they're really going to get after it. They are a team that I could see going after Dalvin Cook and having him come in because I think he'll complement Tony Pollard very well. But I don't know about 45 and 40.
Mike McCarthy offering you a job there, Chief?
Hey!
Stephen Jones calling you there, Justin?
No. I could see him having 4,000 yards and 32 touchdowns. And that's, again, a very good season. It's an improvement. It's something he hasn't done in a long time. He only had 30 touchdowns, I think, twice in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, twice in his career. He's eclipsed 4,000 yards twice in his career. I think it's a good bar for him to have. He should have at least 4,000. He should be striving to have a 4,000 yard, 30 plus touchdown season. And that's about what I expect.
Dallas
45 and 40 is
that's a bit high.
Prime Aaron Rodgers numbers.
His argument is that Dallas has CeeDee Lamb. They added Brandon Cooks via trade. Michael Gallup is closer to coming back off the ACL than we think that he is. Noah Brown was their number 2 last year. He's now in Houston. The rest of their wide receiver room includes Jalen Tolbert, who I was high on in our last year's draft. Soon to be backup center Kevontae Turpin, who was just phenomenal for them on kick returns. And yes, they also lost Dalton Schultz, but they have Luke Schoonmaker from their tight end who they drafted this year, along with Peyton Hendershot and a few other guys that are there. So that, I think, is the crux of the argument here. Now, Jurg, when I said Mike McCarthy, you had one of the more visceral reactions that I was anticipating, which I would have had if you were the one asking this question, and I would have been the one answering it. So 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns, 10 or less interceptions for Dak Prescott. I'm assuming you think that it's an impossibility at this point.
If you didn't mention Mike McCarthy, I'd have considered it. No, that's not happening. Aaron Rodgers wasn't Aaron Rodgers because of Mike McCarthy. He's like, if there's one thing that pisses me off more than us elevating mediocre to above average quarterbacks to higher than, I'm not calling Dak mediocre. I'm saying generally speaking, if there's one thing that pisses me off more than elevating quarterbacks to a higher rank than what they really are, or just players in general, it's making coaches and us, putting them on a higher pedestal than what they deserve to be. I think there is a list of coaches that deserve to be considered as guys that can make these guys definitively great. Mike McCarthy ain't on that goddamn list, and he's nowhere near. I don't care if he's won a Super Bowl. He should still be sending Aaron Rodgers Christmas cards and Thanksgiving cards and happy birthday cards. Probably not a get well soon card because we know Aaron Rodgers just believes in general immunization, not vaccination. But regardless, he should be sending cards for that, because if it wasn't for that, Mike McCarthy would have been ousted out of Green Bay a lot sooner for his playoff failures. There's no reason for me to believe that Mike McCarthy will get that out of Dak Prescott. Does Dak Prescott potentially have the ability to do that? I will give you maybe, because he's gone over 4,500 yards in his career at least once. I think he came close the second time, like Justin was saying, and he's come close to 40 touchdowns once before. I think 4,000 yards definitively, 30 touchdowns definitively should be the case. It's the interceptions that to me is the biggest deal. Is Dak going to be able to cut down on the interception number last season? And will he be able to do that consistently? Because yes, while these tight ends there are young and good, I think the connection he had with Dalton Schultz that he kind of had with when Schultz became the main tight end there from day one, I don't know if that's easy to replicate. Like, you can replicate production. You can maybe on a talent level, maybe could these guys reach a Dalton Schultz of talent? Well, that's not a high bar for tight ends, but it's chemistry. I think chemistry plays a big role into the quarterback tight end dynamics. And I don't necessarily know how quickly the chemistry is going to, be built between Dak and these guys. So I think that's my big thing. Do I still kind of hold it against the Cowboys for not going after Osiris Mitchell? Yes. But if I can look past that, I was high on CeeDee Lamb going into last season. I firmly believe he'll have a pretty good year. So I don't deny that. But then the question is Brandon Cooks and Gallup. And I think Cooks is fine. He's been traded for God knows how many times at this rate. But Is he going to have that same impact with this Dallas scheme? I don't know. And Gallup, like, are we forgetting he did play last season? And I know he was playing after a torn ACL, but are we kind of forgetting he did play last year? Like, this isn't a guy who missed all of last season. He did play. We did see him play. I want to give him some benefit of the doubt because, again, he was coming off of an injury, and not everyone is going to come off of a torn ACL like goddamn Adrian Peterson. I understand that.
There you go.
There's Adrian Peterson, there's Derrick Rose, and in the middle. And Gallup was closer to in the middle last season. So I think, like, there's the talent there, but not Mike McCarthy, man. No. You just made me sour on the whole question.
I think it's why he said
I know. Well, listen, that was the reason why I wanted to say it like that, because yes, if you take Mike McCarthy out of the equation, and also for that term, Brian Schottenheimer out of the equation,
oh god,
possibly. But now I will say this: going into Week 5, Dallas's first 4 games this year are at the Giants, home for the Jets, at the Cardinals, and home for New England. So if this is to come true, I think he's got to get close to 1,000 yards in those first 4 weeks.
He's got to eclipse it.
Yeah, because Week 5 is at San Francisco, and that ain't gonna be fun.
Those have been the demons of both those guys.
They have been. So that is your list of Adam Shine's 9 guaranteed risers. I think this one shines about the same way as a yellow colored diamond that you don't buy in the jewelry stores and engagement ring, because Lord knows she ain't gonna say yes to you if you come home with that rock, if you will. We will have our own list, I think, of guys that we think will be better next year, coming up later on in the summer. We do have one programming note before we get to our main event. This is, of course, our last episode on the Bunts and Bruises YouTube channel. We want to thank our overlords, Bunts and Bruises, for hosting us for 60 weeks of chaos, revelry, nonsense, and me drinking, which I did, which I did offset, of course. But not on the set because I don't want to be drunk. But next week, when we return, or if we don't return next week, the week after that, we will be on our brand new Sports Agents of Chaos YouTube channel. Very excited for that. So we hope that you will all migrate over with us to that. But as we end every episode that we have live, we have ourselves, of course, the main event. Now, in weeks past, this has been known as Rant and Rick's Roasting Podium. But of course, because we flipped everything around on its head today with the Mutiny on the H.M.S. Chaos, I'd like to christen this one Rant and Justin's Hatred Hootenanny Hullabaloo. Yes. Which we discussed a little bit last week. And if you're all ready, get your swear jars out, because this is going to be a fun one. Justin has some words about certain people and certain things, and it's time for him to take the stage.
I don't like to think of myself as an angry person. I complain, but what Jet fan doesn't? Now, I have to say that the agenda that the Jets did not get better this offseason is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I get there's a ton of Jets hate. I get people don't like Jets fans. I get people don't like Aaron Rodgers. Okay? The idea that the Jets got worse because they gave up a first-round pick for a Hall of Fame quarterback on the downswing, sure, fine. I have neighbors. I'm going to be quiet. On the downswing of his career, okay, to give up a first-round pick for a guy whose season last year would have had them in the playoffs, who, if he throws for 25 touchdowns and 3,500 yards, arguably has one of the greatest seasons in Jets history. I don't care if he's 65. Okay? The idea that they are not as good because they didn't draft the 4th left tackle off the board. Broderick Jones might end up being a Hall of Famer. The Jets are worse because they didn't draft the 4th tackle off the board. They're worse because they didn't sign Teddy Bridgewater instead. Look, all I'm saying is I don't understand why certain people have jobs in this business with these kinds of takes. okay? To come out and say you think the Jets will be 4th in the division, we all know who I'm talking about. To come out as 4th in the division is one of the most asinine takes I've heard in my many years talking about football. And I'm not that old a guy. I know. I've been around a lot of asinine takes. Trust me, I'm a Jets fan. I've been around a lot of terrible takes. Okay. I've seen a lot of terrible takes on this show. Who would rather be a Bears fan? Honestly. It should cost people their jobs, is really what it comes down to. And I could do this for hours. Trust me, I am livid with the stuff that makes it on the air. And I know this is what they want. I know they want me to just get angry and talk about it and give them views and ratings, which is why I haven't said any names and haven't said any networks. These people need to get their bias and their BS off of these shows and give the people real factual information. This isn't some hanky-panky news source that you could say whatever the hell you want because it supports your side. That's not the case. There are facts here. There are takes. There are opinions. But there are facts here. And the fact is, with the defense they have, the weapons they have, the weapons they added, to add a Hall of Fame quarterback does not make them worse. That's all I got.
I mean, that's all you need to know. That is all you need to know right there. Well played. Well done. Appreciated the Bears shot, because, the chaos is what the chaos is. And I appreciate it.
You know what? Because I'm mad at another analyst, too. And I'm not going to say his name. But who?
Can I say his name? Is it Adam?
Yes, you can.
Oh,
He had
Adam.
the Bears at 10 wins last year.
Adam. And 12 this year.
They had the number 1 overall pick. They were the worst team in the league, and he has them winning 2 more games.
I've never seen this man.
Oh, my God. Oh.
Why does he make more money than I do?
Because he's been doing it for longer, and no one has checked him on his facts.
He's probably a very hard worker, and I'm sure he's a nice guy. His Bears takes are – I don't know how he gets it on TV with those takes. He might call – the other 31 teams perfectly. He is so off and biased with these Bear takes, and I know he is. I've seen him post about it. He'll tell you he's biased. He knows what he's doing. But they're just so infuriatingly off.
At least keep kayfabe alive, my guy.
I mean, I was gonna say at least he's still on brand, But maybe this is a good cause for us to move forward in the future. No Dalvin's allowed in Minnesota, and no Adams allowed as NFL analysts. Maybe that's a possible thing. So we're coming for you next, Archuleta. You're next. Well, Justin, we want to get that out of your system, and we appreciate you for doing that. Of course, you had a lot of things that you wanted to get off your chest, and we thank you for it. Maybe, Jurg, on our new channel, we should post a 6-hour, just have Justin just be angry at the camera for 6 hours straight and just ranting everything that he needs to do.
I was gonna say, Justin has an amazing, intense rant face. Like he does. I felt the criticism bare into my soul.
I'm shocked and bewildered as a Bears fan to hear this criticism, but also I expected it was coming. It's been building up over weeks. It's been coming. Yeah. So that's all.
A close second to my rant. I mean, who gives up on their fandom?
I did. You know why? For the content. That's why we do that. Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude episode 60 of the Sports Agents of Chaos. We thank you for joining this mutinous episode. A reminder, once again, next week will be on our new YouTube channel, so come join us for all of that fun. And the rules will go back to normal, which means that Jurg will be hosting, Justin will do the games, and I will rant about things that are, really angering me. So, a little teaser. Jay Monahan, you got a week off next week. It's time for your evisceration. So we're going to have some fun with that. Thank you all once again for joining us. Good night to everybody in Oman and Uzbekistan, but not Kyrgyzstan because I'm still fighting with you. And we will see all of you next week for more fun, football, and, of course, a teeny little bit, although in this case was a lot of bit, of chaos. For Billy Shakes and all of us, take care, everybody.